here are my minimum requirements. And I like to add something that says, what else do you have to offer? What are some things that we might not have thought of? Because there's always things that you didn't think of. And, put that in your proposal and let us look at your roadmap. What are you developing? What are you talking about in the future? And when we get the demo, and we allow not just the business, but also technology to be on the demo and ask questions, you can see when they're really getting interested and the collaboration starts happening. So they'll say, oh, your software can do this. Well, can it also do this? And this vendor doesn't always know something was a problem because they're creating a software to solve a problem. Yeah. But you're in a business and you're the one having the problem. So that communication to let them know, this is the train I see coming down the tracks at me.
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Wendy Storino. Now, Wendy has over 18 years as a procurement executive in technology procurement across finance and healthcare and a wealth of experience. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, when I think about successful women in procurement leadership, I know that there's a whole bunch of things, especially earlier in your career, that you would have gotten some coaching that maybe didn't fit you, or maybe some of the way things were done didn't feel really natural, especially with that kind of natural spirit of collaboration that's so important. And 20 years ago, procurement wasn't necessarily collaborative by default. And I know that's something that you're passionate about, and it's really helped you in your career. What can you share with us?
Yeah, when I started in procurement, it was IT asset management. It was, technology was bought in technology. And so most of the procurement people, it was called IT asset management because they bought the hardware, the software, it was all on-prem. Things weren't in the cloud yet. So you had to have people that knew something about it. And the goal was really to get it and keep the costs down. It wasn't really to collaborate. They really, wanted to say, this is what we want and this is how much we want it. And there was less about really sitting down and talking with the business area to find out, well, what is it that you need? What are your requirements? What are you willing to give up, for the sake of negotiation? It didn't start out collaborative. And in fact, there was people that would, if you got off the call and you were just, hammering on a supplier, people would get in the hallway and flap for you afterwards. And it was very adversarial. And a lot of people really live for that and like that part of the job. That's not something that I like. And a lot of the other women procurement people that I've met have not found that is the best way to handle the way we like to handle things. And I think the way that most women like to handle things is to be more collaborative, to listen. What is it that you really want? At the end of the day, do you want a boat anchor or do you want something that works? And let's get there because as long as you let the vendor know, or the supplier know what it is that you're really looking for, what problem you're trying to solve, they want to help you solve that problem. They want to make their money, but they want to help you solve the problem. And that's what you need at the end of the day.
I really love the emphasis on listening because that communication street is really two ways. And there's still some parts of procurement and some pockets of procurement that aren't really listening. They're more demanding and then grinding on price, which to me, this isn't really procurement so much as extraction. That's more of a behavior of how you mine minerals from the ground. It's not necessarily how you extract value from a supply chain and how you create value for your own organization to, create those opportunities to create the, 1 + 1 = 3 or 11. I'm curious, what were some of the examples in your life where listening created an opportunity or a new level of value that was unlocked that people previously would have been unable to discover if they had taken the typical demand and grind approach to vendor relations?
Yeah, and I think I have a good example of something that happened early, really early in my career. There was an SOW that was done, and it was the let's grind it down and just get it done really fast and, get the price down. And the business area didn't get what they wanted. They were promised something that they didn't get, and they paid. And so they came back to procurement and said, what can we do? And I went through the contract with them. Did you do this? They didn't do any of the things because they really didn't understand what their parts of the responsibility was. And the way that the SOW was set up, it was just set up to pay the vendor at certain dates, not have the milestone received. So I learned a lot from that experience because my business people were really mad. And when someone's screaming at you, you learn what to do next. So, on the next, so after years of trying to do postmortems when things really went wrong, I now really listen to what the vendor is saying they're going to do for you and what the business is saying, yes, that's what I want, and what's not in the document. So I try to put those things in the document. I have language for pretty much every contingency. And so a lot of times the vendors will call up the business area and say, we don't like this girl. She keeps putting everything in writing that we're saying, we're nice. Just trust us.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so the business will call.
There's usually a red flag right there, Wendy, right?
Huge red flag. And then the business will call me up afterwards. Can you be nicer? I'm being as nice as I can while getting it in writing. And they will say, well, why do we have to get everything in writing? And I've explained to them, once you're done, the sales rep is going on to his next deal, and you'll be passed off to the implementation team. And they're not listening to all the conversations. They don't know what he's promised. So that's why you have to get it in writing. Well, can't we just trust them? My experience is
we would love to.
You can't.
Yeah.
They're going to do this. And, 8 months later, I talked to the business in the hallway, and they say, you're right. Everything you said would happen happened, but we had it in the contract just like you said. And because we had it in the contract, we were able to get what we wanted in the first place. And that comes a lot from learning from your mistakes, from listening to what they really want at the end of the day, letting go of what you really don't need. You don't have to fight for every little inch. Yeah. What do you really want? And that's what you should really go for.
There's something really powerful in that too, Wendy, and there's a forcing function because some organizations want to sign a contract and then say, whatever, we'll change our mind tomorrow. And the requirements start to move and drift and move and drift and move and drift. And that's one of those ingredients that creates an absolute chaos and a terrible outcome for everybody. I love the way your approach drives listening and recording of what are we looking for. And there's that mutual agreement of what success is, mutually agreed success criteria, we could call it. And how when you agree on that, you write that down in enough detail. And then you say, look, by the time we're done, we will have achieved this, right? And it's that outcome that we achieve. And now here's some things along the way that need to happen to make that we agree this is, this is the how. There's so much power in this. And we had a chance to have a conversation, an interview like this with the World Commerce and Contracting team. And there was a really powerful stat that they shared, and it's so important. And I love your approach because it perfectly aligns with what they were really emphasizing is make sure that 80% of your time and energy in your contracting goes into what is the outcome you're creating and what are both parties going to do to make it successful. And then there's a little bit of time on now here's some liability and indemnity and other things in case it goes wrong. But that 80% of the effort on what good looks like and how we're going to get there together, that alignment is so powerful because it really forces the clarity of what are we doing here? And I love that that's just a core part of how you approach things. And I hope more teams will pick up on that. And if you're in a team, if you're watching this and you're in a team and somebody in your business says, we need the flexibility to change your requirements tomorrow. Well, okay, then you don't know what you want, and you're not ready to contract for much of anything yet, other than a potential never-ending walking purchase order. But just understand that that's what you'd be getting into.
Right. And if you just let them know and they're like, no, I don't want that,
Yeah,
then okay, let's put it in the contract.
yeah,
I can use
yeah,
an example. I sent my husband to the store once for rotisserie chicken. I had
yeah.
3 grandkids to feed. He comes home with a mango habanero rotisserie chicken. I mean, I
Ooh.
didn't even know they made that, but I didn't give him any requirements. I
I
just
mean, it
said,
sounds
bring me a
tasty,
chicken.
but I bet the young kids did not like the
Yeah,
habanero part.
I mean I couldn't feed that to the little kids. There was no way. And so here we are, dinner time. I don't have the right kind of chicken, but I'm like, I have to look at myself there. I didn't give him any
Yeah.
criteria. He just grabbed the first chicken that was rotisserie chicken,
He loves habanero, right?
right?
You know, it makes sense.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and the who's the chicken for and a few things like that all,
yeah,
you know, it's the context and the what success looks like. What's the outcome we're creating?
right,
Like grandkids fed and happy, not
right,
grandkids looking for milk and yogurt and bread,
right, exactly.
and with
To
tears in their
define it.
eyes. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's amazing how many things we learn from, you know, being parents and grandparents that apply to work and the definition of done and the success criteria. And, you know, what are those norms that we're going to agree to go and make that happen together are
exactly.
so, so powerful. And, you know, you talked about how, you know, listening really flips the script to create two-way communication. And so much of procurement is often brought back to sort of the three bids in a buy or the competitive process. What are some of the things that you've seen teams doing really well to leave room for the innovation, to leave room for the, oh, I didn't even know computers could do that kind of capability that can come back in an RFP that maybe wasn't expected when it was originally written and put out there?
So I find a lot of times when we're doing an RFP, we're either doing it to replace something that's not working for us anymore that we've had for years, or to find something new that we didn't have and we're really not sure what's out there. And so I like to structure both kinds of scenarios in a way that says, here are my minimum requirements. And I like to add something that says, what else do you have to offer? What are some things that we might not have thought of? Because there's always things that you didn't think of.
Yeah,
And, put that in for your proposal and let us look at your roadmap. What are you developing? What are you talking about in the future? And when we get the demo, and we allow not just the business, but also technology to be on the demo and ask questions, you can see when they're really getting interested and the collaboration starts happening. So they'll
yeah,
say, oh, your software can do this. Well, can it also do this? And this vendor doesn't always know something was a problem because they're creating a
yeah,
software to solve a problem, but you're in a business and you're the one having the problem. So that communication to let them know this is the train I see coming down the tracks at me and I need to solve it. And the vendor sometimes, I didn't know that was a problem. And they'll start putting in that feedback. They'll take that feedback. I've seen them put it on roadmaps, feedback from RFPs, and then put that in their product later. And so the two-way communication helps because the vendor not only gets the information of what the problem is and can build it into their software and thereby also help their other customers, but the company that you're working for can get their problem solved. And so
yeah,
making sure that you open that up and let them talk and let them collaborate is really important. Sometimes you just, as a procurement person, you want to just sit back and after you ask a few questions, let them talk to each other in their own language because they find out a lot more than you ever could. You don't have to be an expert in everything. You
absolutely.
just have to know to ask a few questions and lead them to the water, and they will pick it up from there.
100%. And I know one of the most wonderful things in our experience, I mean, for me, it's 12 and a half years since I started my business. And I have had so many amazing opportunities to go bring some new capability into the product with a customer that just said and agreed, or we agreed, hey, this makes a lot of sense. This would be super helpful if ... And then sometimes that makes sense and we can put that in, the next sort of 6 to 12 months. And sometimes that's like, hey, no, if we had that now, this would be worth a lot of money to us. So, how could we accelerate that? How could we have that in 3 months? And those become really powerful conversations when there's kind of time and space for those to unlock those things, because it's that joint creation of value where the supply chain really tightens up and things can accelerate. So I love that you create space for that. And sometimes there's a facilitation component of introduce, step back, and then listen and encourage with some good questions. That there's, out of the extract and grind, doesn't leave any room for that. So I think that collaborative approach is so much more powerful.
And you can see this is what they love to do. So their passion then gets ignited on both sides. Yeah. It's less of a boring RFP demo and more of a collaborative, conversation when they start talking like that. And that's where the magic happens, I think.
Oh, I love it. Wendy, I am so grateful. I know, better collaboration, better listening, really write it down and, define what good looks like, success, the outcome, and how we're going to do that. Such important takeaways. And some of those feel like the motherhood and apple pie, but sometimes we all need a reminder that it's time for some good pie. Yeah. Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you investing some time with us, and wishing you all the best. For all of you out there, thank you for joining another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement.